Hi, this is Daniela Cambone, here to share with you that if you're trying to figure out the real reason why so many Americans keep getting wealthier and others get left behind, well, there's a new report from the experts at Stansberry Research you may want to check out. It's called Will You Get Left Behind, and walks you through what is actually happening right now in America. You'll learn all about the number one investment you need to make today to make sure you don't fall behind. Barron's reports this incredible asset has already created an estimated 20,000 new millionaires and perhaps 10 times that number. I guarantee this new report will force you to think about what is happening in America in a very different way, and you could make a ton of money too. So to get your free copy of this new report, go to www.leftbehindreport.com. Again, that's leftbehindreport.com for your free copy of this report. Hi, this is Daniela Cambone, and welcome back to Stansberry Research. Our Outlook 2022 continues with the person you couldn't wait to hear from. So please welcome back to the show, the host of the KEISER Report, and of course, one of the most recognizable faces on the planet when it comes to the topic of Bitcoin. Max Keiser, welcome back to the show here.
Hey, Daniela, great to be with you.
And I just want to say, just for you, Max, I came dressed for the occasion, wearing my Max It Up t-shirt. That's how excited I am for this interview. How's your new year going so far?
It's great. You know, we are seeking citizenship in El Salvador to become a citizen of the first country in the world to make Bitcoin legal tender. And it's really the most exciting thing to happen in Bitcoin since, I guess 2009 when Bitcoin started. And we're also helping in the project of volcano bonds. So the country is going to raise $1 billion in volcano bonds. And I think we can get that number up toward the $20 billion level. My goal is to make this country debt free. So this is some of the excitement that's going on here in El Salvador, thanks to the president Bukele, who made Bitcoin legal tender.
Yes, and that, as we know, was historic news when that came out. I want to talk to you about that. Obviously, a lot of excitement about your return on this show, because last year you came on my show and you gave your famous outlook for 2021. Max Keiser's 2021 Bitcoin forecast. You're hearing it for the first time here, folks.
I'm going with $220,000 per Bitcoin.
That, of course, made worldwide headlines, 220,000. We will talk about that, of course, but we do want to talk El Salvador. We want to talk about what's happening right now in Bitcoin. And of course, I will also reveal my Bitcoin forecast that I wrote down with Max. I also have a forecast for Bitcoin.
Okay.
I'm not going to say it. I'm going to write it down on a piece of paper, fold it, and put it into this desk that you don't see in the shot. Who came closer to their target? Do we have a wager on that?
Yeah, I think we wagered a cup of coffee.
Well, stay tuned to the end to find out, folks. All right. First, let's start with the price, Max. Okay, this is number one question, so let's just clear the air here. And I always say it's extremely difficult to come on a show and make forecasts. You were calling for, Bitcoin over 220,000 by November. You said you use proprietary information when you come to these calculations. I've now seen that you've moved that target. So let's talk about, first of all, let's talk about what you think went wrong with what was a huge miss on forecast here, because we're now at a 3-month low. As we're taping this now, Bitcoin's hovering around 42,000.
Right. So, well, as you know, we first started covering Bitcoin in 2011 when it was $1. And at that time, I was forecasting $100,000 per Bitcoin based on its ability to grab a significant portion of the global Forex market and to compete with gold. Now, as far as 2021 goes, I said, hey, we're going to get to 220,000 per coin, which is a typical 4-year cycle. What we had in 2021 was that massive China collapse in mining and hash power. So the mining and the hash power collapsed 50%. We have since recovered that now, and we're about to hit new all-time high in hash rate. And so that's why I'm pushing my $220,000 target from 2021 to 2022. So there's really a couple of numbers to keep in mind. There's price, there's hash rate, and there's the difficulty adjustment. Those are the three things you have to keep in mind. I've always said that price lags hash rate, that hash rate precedes price. And so we're going to see new all-time highs in the hash rate and followed by new all-time highs in Bitcoin price. The underlying fundamentals have only gotten stronger. The fiat money world is crumbling. Inflation is out of control. The Bitcoin network is getting stronger. If you look at the on-chain analysis, that is to say, the people who are actually doing transactions, not derivatives, but on the actual Bitcoin blockchain, we see an increase in the holdings of Bitcoin. The recent price action is driven mostly by derivatives. So the same kind of price discovery you see in the gold market that's kept gold now flat for 10 years and hasn't really budged at all. You start to see some of the derivatives have an influence on the price discovery in Bitcoin. Ultimately, it doesn't matter because the demand for Bitcoin is virtually infinite. Because fiat money is, as it always does, it's going to go to zero. All fiat money goes to zero, and we'll see that with the U.S. dollar as well. And Bitcoin is now, if you listen to guys like Bill Miller or Paul Tudor Jones or any of the other major hedge funds out there, they're now openly saying that Bitcoin competes with gold. It's going to get a market share of gold. Gold's market share is about $8, $9, $10 trillion. Bitcoin is going to eclipse that market cap at some point. So all the fundamentals are very strong. So I'm just bumping my $220,000 target from 2021 to 2022. I've been doing well for the past 10 years since I first recommended Bitcoin at $1. So nobody's really complaining.
No, and I do want to point that out that 2021 was a miss, but you have accurately called Bitcoin's price in the past. Now, few things I want to point out with what you've said. One, I feel that there was a lot of exuberance and excitement surrounding the Bitcoin price last year, but this year, the bears are out in full force. Yeah, you named some names, but a lot of the experts have been coming on, like Gareth Soloway or Novogratz also, are saying that we could see a crypto winter here. Soloway comparing the moment that we're seeing him here in Bitcoin to a .com moment. Now he's bullish long-term, and yes, he's just one technical trader, but other technical traders are also pointing that we will be entering severe bear territory here, having breached the 46,000 target, and we could be here for a few years. Do you pay attention to the technicals?
I have no idea who Soloway is. And Novogratz is a hedge fund guy who's kind of an arrivist who came later into the game. I mean, he's a trader, and for traders who are aggressive traders, that's a different game. I'm not really a trader. I'm a holder. I'm a hodler. I don't invest in Bitcoin. I divest out of fiat money and I divest out of gold. And I'd rather be a day early than a day late. As you see, Jay Powell and the central banks around the world are in panic mode. They're printing at a level you'd have to compare to Weimar Germany or Zimbabwe, and they're literally about to torch this economy and the fiat money world down to the ground. So there's only one unconfiscatable, uncensorable money in the world, and that's Bitcoin. And that's the fundamental story. So you should own it. You should own it aggressively. If you're a trader and you're looking for trader signals and technical analysis, I agree with what Peter Lynch said about technical analysts. They're 100% correct when looking backwards. They're 100% correct in predicting the past, right? I don't know of a single technical analyst billionaire in the world. Technical analysis is essentially astrology for men.
Okay, fair enough. When you were on, and I asked you, well, when you come to your forecast, how do you come up with these forecasts? And you say you have that's your secret sauce. You have proprietary information. You're just not making up numbers here. So when you say, so the all-time high for the hash rate, is that part of the equation that you're looking at?
Hash rate precedes price. So hash rate is the strength of the network. It adds to the security. It's something that no altcoin or what we call shitcoins have, including Ethereum. They're all centralized and they're all vulnerable and they don't have any hash rate at all, really. whereas Bitcoin has most of the hash rate, the overwhelming majority of the hash rate. The hash rate keeps going higher. When countries like El Salvador make Bitcoin legal tender, now my understanding is that several other countries will follow suit and make Bitcoin legal tender as well. That's another huge fundamental plus for Bitcoin going forward. The 4-year cycle, which is tied to the halving that happens every 4 years, has been a somewhat reliable predictor of price going back to the beginning of Bitcoin. I've lived through 3 90% drawdowns in Bitcoin since I first started buying it in 2011. And this particular drawdown is not particularly worrisome. It's a great buying opportunity. You know, people are always saying, oh, Bitcoin at 75,000 or 65,000 is too expensive. You know, I wish it were cheaper. Well, okay, it's cheaper. So you should be backing up the truck, loading the boat aggressively. Only have money in fiat shit coins or gold that you're willing to lose. Any money you have in Bitcoin is unconfiscatable. It's uncensorable. That's your only wealth. That is your only wealth, is your Bitcoin wealth. Everything else is confiscatable or going to be inflated away out of existence.
And we'll get to gold. You know, I always get to gold with you at one point. But sticking to the hash rate, why are you confident we see an all-time high in the hash rate this year then?
Because the network is growing rapidly and it is already about hitting a new all-time high. So it's flirting with new all-time highs as we speak already in the first few weeks of 2022. So that trend should continue because more and more miners are coming into the network because mining is a hugely profitable business. The average miner's cost per Bitcoin is under $8,000 per coin. So at these levels, it's a wildly profitable business. And you're going to see more and more countries start to mine Bitcoin. Remember, I said on your show a few years ago that I was anticipating what I call hash wars or the hash race. So right now you've got El Salvador, who's accumulating Bitcoin. They're doing Bitcoin volcano bonds. And we see a couple of other countries mining Bitcoin and adding Bitcoin to strategic reserves. I think once a country in the G7 starts to accumulate and mine Bitcoin, it'll set off like a space race that we saw in the 60s where the Soviets put up the Sputnik satellite and it launched the space race and a man landing on the moon. I think once a G7 country comes out and says, hey, you know, we're adding Bitcoin to our reserves, we're mining Bitcoin, then you're going to see other countries say, hey, we got to get in on this. The U.S. will come in. The U.S. will come in and start to mine Bitcoin. You've already got a lot of senators in the U.S. right now, like Cynthia Lummis. A third, as I understand it, a third of all of her contributions coming in right now are coming from Bitcoiners. And now we've got many congressmen and senators that are into Bitcoin. We've got governors into Bitcoin. You've got the mayor of Miami. Wyoming was probably going to become a Bitcoin state. Texas could very well secede from the United States and become a Bitcoin state. So this is the power of Bitcoin. It shows you what you can do with unconfiscatable, uncensorable, perfect money. You start to think differently about the world around you and the governments around you.
Okay, absolutely. If a G7 country were to step in, that'd be a game changer, of course. But how plausible is that for you? How far away?
I think it's 100% guaranteed certainty. Because we live in a fiat money world and the fiat money world is collapsing and Bitcoin is the go-to currency if you want to have unconfiscatable, uncensorable, perfect money. You're going to go to Bitcoin. That's the choice. So, and also in this region, in Central America and Latin America, El Salvador's economy is going to be, they're going to report a 10, 11% growth. Next year, they're looking to do 20%. So now all the countries in this area are like, we're not going to let El Salvador, grow without being challenged at all. So we've got other countries in the region who are now saying, yeah, we want to jump in and we want to get in on this and we want growth as well. So in Africa and Nigeria, for example, you see huge Bitcoin adoption. Now you've got all kinds of countries in Africa who are going to leapfrog the whole 20th century build out of the banking infrastructure that has kept them essentially a colony of the Wall Street banks. They can leapfrog that and say, you know what, we don't need any of the Wall Street banks. We don't need any banks at all. We can do everything we need with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is our bank. We can save, we can transact. That's our bank, and it's growing like wildfire. So a lot of these things go unnoticed because what's happening in Central America or in Africa don't make the nightly news in America. You know, they're too concerned about Nancy Pelosi's eyebrows or distractions.
On the distractions, on the topic of central banks, that was another part of the equation to your forecast, that we would see one central bank fail in 2021. What was that bank that you were predicting, and have you pushed that forecast out too, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, they're very weak. So the European Central Bank, the ECB, is one that I said was very, very weak. But I think, you look at any of the central banks around the world, and they're just in a very weakened state. The leverage in the Fed they're much more leverage at the Fed than Enron was before Enron collapsed. So these central banks are just enormously problematic. I think the central bank in Lebanon did collapse. It did effectively collapse. So I was correct.
Right, but I believe you were calling for the ECB to collapse.
Well, Daniela, I said a central bank will collapse. Lebanon collapsed, and so that's pretty good. I put that up against any of your other predictions and prognostications of any of the other guests.
Okay, I want to get back to the pressure on Bitcoin right now. You mentioned derivatives, but what about the Fed's taper program that's revving up steam and looking to become more and more aggressive?
Daniela, you can't taper a Ponzi scheme. How many times are you going to fall for this fake news? How many times is Lucy going to pull the football away from Charlie Brown? This is the same thing we've been seeing for 20 years. The Fed threatens taper and then they loosen policy. It never happens. Inflation under Paul Volcker's time was racing higher than, less than it is right now. And Volcker took interest rates up to 15, 16%, right? So they're already way behind the curve. Interest rates to deal with the current inflation should already be 8, 9, 10% on the overnight rates at the Fed. That's the way it should be if they were doing their job correctly. So why don't they do it? Well, for one thing, the duration risk of the Fed's balance sheet is way out on the curve. So even a 1 basis point rise in rates totally obliterates the Fed's balance sheet. They're in the weakest position they've ever been. So too with every central bank in the world. They're not going to taper, Danielle. They're going to print. They're going to announce, all we need is 1 or 2 more down days on the NASDAQ, and they're going to announce a $10 trillion bailout or more. That's the pattern. We've seen it now for 20 years. I can't believe people are still fooled by this.
Because they want to keep the stock market up.
Who's an investor in the stock market? Nancy Pelosi, senators, congressmen, insiders, market manipulators, right? Of course, they only look at the stock market. That's the only gauge. There is no price stability, and employment is a complete disaster. That's ostensibly what they're supposed to be looking at, but they don't. They only look at their friends in Congress and on Wall Street. It's a rolling bailout of Wall Street, and it's a gift. Insider trading is legal in Washington. And they're cashing out. They're making hundreds of millions and billions of dollars playing this game, pretending that they're not extraordinarily corrupt. It's an extraordinarily corrupt situation. Jay Powell, is corrupt. That's the bottom line.
You think lawmakers, and this question was posed to Pelosi, should be banned from investing in U.S. equities or stock markets in general?
It's a conflict of interest. I mean, if I look at the news, if I go to like MSNBC or CNN, I'll see a report on COVID featuring quotes from senators who own Pfizer. And then I'll take a break and see an ad from Pfizer. Then we come back to Anderson Cooper talking about it, we just saw an ad from Pfizer, who's got on as his guest a politician who owns Pfizer stock and is passing laws that are beneficial to Pfizer. Now, this is the most shameless and corrupt scandal ever in American history. I don't think you can really point to a time in American history when you had such a shameless pilfering of the public wealth from these politicians. They're literally stuffing bags of money every day, and the media is completely culpable in this. They don't have any investigative journalism at all in America. That's been pretty much obliterated. People have to resort to listening to podcasts like Joe Rogan to get any semblance of what's going on. So this is, yes, I would say that insider trading by politicians who make the laws that impact those companies, that's a conflict of interest that is anathema to the tenets of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. It's anti-constitutional. It's anti-American. It's people, the U.S. complains. They're saying, "Oh no, we have foreign governments interfering with our elections." Well, we have politicians in D.C. interfering with our elections. They're the corrupt ones. They're projecting their corruption onto other governments. Nobody's more corrupt than they are.
Are they? What's a nice word for lying?
Prevarication. Prevarication.
On inflation numbers, you mentioned inflation. Do you buy the numbers they're telling us? Have we reached peak inflation? I want you to go a little deeper on Max Keiser's thoughts on the inflation story here.
Nobody believes that inflation is running at what the government says it's running at. That's absurd. Nobody believes it anymore. I mean, for years they were able to mask it because labor was outsourced to China, so we didn't see it show up in labor costs. But when you have like Paul Krugman at the New York Times say that inflation's good for lower classes and the working class, but then at the same time, you see a report that categorically, patently states that the inflation is reduced purchasing power to levels that make any wage gains insignificant, if not negative. You have to ask yourself, who is Paul Krugman working for? Who is the New York Times working for? It's not for Americans. What foreign government is directing Paul Krugman at this point? He's not. He's saying things that are patently false and misleading. So I have to really question that. So, I mean, Daniela, it's no secret that inflation is running, 15%. If you look at loss of purchasing power, you're talking 15%. It's really galloping out of control.
Bitcoin fixes that, though. How?
Because it's finite supply, and it's got infinite demand, and it's a safe harbor, and that's where people are going to protect themselves against fiat money. You can't print Bitcoin. You can print fiat money. Gold supply is not fixed either. So it's the go-to commodity. That's why Paul Tudor Jones calls it the fastest horse in the race. Paul Tudor Jones is one of the first people to come out and say, maybe 2.5 years ago, that inflation was going to be a problem. And this is when policymakers were saying that they were warning against deflation. He was saying, no, it's actually inflation. It's going to become a problem. That's why I'm buying inflation-sensitive assets. And Bitcoin is the fastest horse in the race. And he put 1% of his portfolio into Bitcoin. I believe he's raised that allocation to 5%. Then Michael Saylor, of course, came out and said, hey, the monetary energy of the US dollar is depreciating by 15% a year. That's the true inflation number. Your purchasing power is being destroyed by 15% a year. We're buying Bitcoin as our play against inflation. And I must say, heroically, Michael Saylor could have borrowed money from the Fed and bought back their own stock, and he could have made a lot of money doing what Microsoft and Google and Amazon and all those corporations do. They buy back their own stock, which, by the way, was illegal not too long ago, with that ultra low interest rate from the Fed. You see, when the Fed says there's not much inflation, therefore they're going to keep interest rates low, they're doing that so that insiders can borrow at those ultra cheap rates, buy their own stock. Their executive stock options double, triple, quadruple. They cash out and they make a lot of money. But us who are not in on that game, if we go on our credit card, it's still 18%, Daniela. How come my credit card interest rate is still 17, 18% during the last 5 to 10 years when rates have come down substantially? How come my Visa, MasterCard it's not at 5 or 6%. Right? Because it's what I call interest rate apartheid. If you're not a friend of Goldman Sachs, you live in a Bantustan, you live in a ghetto of high interest rates, and you're squeezed. And you never get to save any money. But if you're a friend of Goldman Sachs, you get to borrow at 0%, invest in assets, and you collectively are buying the same assets. Those go up in price, then you can use those as collateral to borrow more money and just repeat this over and over again. That's why the wealth and income gap, the wealth gap is so high in America. It's higher now than even during the robber baron era because of this interest rate apartheid engineered by the Fed, condoned by Nancy Pelosi. And this is why Bitcoin is going to $220,000 in the short term and going a lot higher as interest rates and the dollar create this insurmountable obstacle for anyone trying to save money who's not in Bitcoin.
How does one become a friend of Goldman Sachs? That's the real question.
It's very easy, Daniela. Goldman Sachs and the US government, it's a revolving door. Look at who runs central banks around the world? Goldman Sachs executives. Who runs all the big banks and all the banking relationships and the Davos crowd and the IMF and the World Bank? Ex-Goldman Sachs executives. It's a revolving door of corruption. I mean, it's the most corrupt country ever in history. If you look at the number of actual theft that's been going on, no country in history has stolen more from the people. Look at the interest rate arbitrage in the pension account. That's $5 trillion has been taken from pension accounts that should be yielding 4.5%, 5% on a normal interest rate scenario to the pockets of speculators in Goldman Sachs. That's a $5 trillion heist. Tell me in history a country that stole $5 trillion from its population. I'm waiting. Tell me. And that's just one of a multiple piece theft that's been going on for decades because of the central banks and the fiat money and the derivatives market and the insiders have collected a protected class of larcenistic, corrupt public officials and bankers that have no pushback whatsoever from the media, from government, or from any country. I would love if somebody in the Canadian government sent down the Mounties to help us deal with this corruption. We need help, world. America's the most corrupt nation in the world. Will some nation help us? Canada, send down your Mounties and arrest these people for us because we're incapable of governing ourselves.
I'm not even gonna go there.
Yeah, why not? You live in America too.
Right now I'm in Canada though, so I could tell you we won't go. All right, I want to get to some viewer fan / questions for Max KEISER, who is very revved up today. Max, you're bringing the heat. All right. This one comes from Thomas McLaughlin. He says, Max, why has BTC been acting like a risk asset correlated to the US stock markets lately? And what will it take to decouple?
Bitcoin has always been decoupled. It's on its own vector. It's not correlated to anything. So it started off at essentially 0 and it's heading to be essentially Bitcoin. You have to understand Bitcoin is a 51% attack on the global energy. So 51% of all global energy will be dedicated to Bitcoin, and this will starve to death all fiat money, shitcoins, and gold. And the price is essentially going to infinity because in dollar terms, because the dollar is going to 0. So it's on its own vector. It's not correlated to anything. Occasionally, in any 6-month period, you could look at a chart and say, oh, why is this correlated or not correlated? But over 10 years, 11 years, it's not correlated to anything. It breaks all the rules. Again, as Michael Saylor has said, it smashes all the rules.
Okay, next question from CB. I know in the past you have responded and said that Bitcoin cannot be manipulated, but this is coming up more than once here. He says, does he not believe Bitcoin is now being managed similar to gold and silver?
Well, no, because unlike gold, you have with Bitcoin an impenetrable wall of encryption that protects the underlying protocol, and the demand ultimately is infinite. So Bitcoin has infinite demand, gold does not. And gold also is being replaced by Bitcoin. So gold is being demonetized the same way silver has been demonetized. So in the short term, you have derivatives traders and derivatives markets, and you do have a lot of the games that we see in various markets will have an impact on the short term on price. But if you look at the long-term chart, look at the 10-year chart, you see a very orderly, ascent higher, and that will continue really for during the course of everyone who's watching this during their lifetime. That will be the course of the price. It will just continue to go up over your lifetime, my lifetime, and everyone who's watching this over their lifetime.
Yeah, this one's coming in from Mark. What are your thoughts on the CBDC and China rolling out their own digital currency? Does this help or hurt Bitcoin in the long run?
The Chinese CBDC is meaningless. It's just another centralized digital offering. It's not different than what they have currently. It's just more centralization. Bitcoin is decentralized. It's the only purely decentralized money ever in the history of the world. And a Chinese centralized digital coin, it is no competition. It doesn't mean anything. Someday China will capitulate and start buying Bitcoin. They're going to pay a lot more for it. They made a similar mistake 500 years ago during the Ming Dynasty when they burnt down their treasure fleet. China was on the verge of conquering the world. Then some bureaucrat got in office, decided that the merchants were too powerful, and they burnt down all their ships. Similarly, last year, China got rid of all their miners. It's probably the worst catastrophe economically for China since they burnt their treasure fleet 500 years ago. It's really, really stupid. They're going to pay the price dearly when they have to come back into the market and start accumulating Bitcoin at $1 million or $2 million a coin.
All right, Meme Sergeant Spliff asked, and a lot of silver questions came up for you. Can you please ask Max about his thoughts on the silver squeeze? Earlier in the 2010s, he was a big name behind it. Curious to get his thoughts on the progress made by Wall Street Silver, Reddit movement, etc.
Right. So at that time, if you recall, after the financial crisis of 2008, Bear Stearns was acquired by JP Morgan, and they inherited this unbelievably large silver short position. So at that time, if we got the price of silver up to, I forget the exact number, but I think it was maybe 150 or something an ounce, then we could have bankrupted JP Morgan and put them out of business. So we got the price from 15 to 50. That was thanks to the Crash JP Morgan Buy Silver campaign that we created back at that time. Then, of course, they increased the margin requirements, and the feds came in to bail out JP Morgan once again. And we saw the price now dip back to where it was. But that unique situation doesn't exist anymore. So it's no longer a viable play, in my opinion.
But are you a supporter of such movements? Like when you see this happening, are you like rooting for those guys?
I think the best movement is just by Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a way to defund Wall Street, defund central banks, defund fiat money, defund shitcoins, defund gold, just buy Bitcoin. It's remember during our lifetime, Daniela, we had something called the Greenspan put, which started in the 1980s. And every time the markets came down, the Fed would come in to bail everybody out. That was called the Greenspan put, became the Bernanke put, the Janet Yellen put. Now you have the J. Powell put. They simply won't let markets function with true price discovery. They're constantly bailing people out. We live now in an era called the Bitcoin call. It's like just buy Bitcoin and watch everything else around you burn to the ground, and you'll be fine.
At the last time we spoke, you still own gold and silver. You said you weren't planning on selling it because it was hard to sell your gold. It's offshore, whatever. Has that changed? Have you sold, or do you still hold your gold and silver?
I used it as collateral to buy more Bitcoin, and I've been easing out of it. So I'm not 100% out yet, but I hope to be this year.
Completely out of your gold and silver?
Yes.
All into Bitcoin. You're all in.
Yeah, of course, because that's the only thing that's going to survive.
Okay. Let me segue. This is a comment, but I think there's a bigger question to this. So let me read the comment with that caveat. I respect Max, but the irony is he's ever so slowly turning into his buddy, Peter Schiff, with his gold targets, but Max with his Bitcoin price projections. I think the bigger question is this. Is Max KEISER so married to being bullish on Bitcoin? Would you ever come out and say, hey, it's looking like a bearish territory to me right now?
Well, the big difference between myself and Peter Schiff is that Peter's been wrong for 10 years. He's been wrong about bonds. He's been wrong about gold. He's been wrong about silver. He's been wrong about foreign mining stocks. He's been wrong about Bitcoin. He's been wrong about the China market. The fund that we know that's publicly quoted is down over 10 years. He's probably the worst money manager in history. Whereas I've been saying buy Bitcoin since $1. It was probably the best call in history. So that's the fundamental difference between myself and Peter Schiff. And, I started my career on Wall Street, and I consider myself to be pretty well versed in markets. And I've invented technologies. I've invented market making technologies. I've sold market making technologies to Wall Street banks for considerable sums of money. I invented prediction markets. I invented digital currencies, digital market making, and digital money. Those are all been patented. You can look it up. 5950176 is the patent number and associated patents. So I've actually got expertise, history, and have been right. Peter talks a lot and he's been wrong. So I don't see the comparison.
Yeah, no, but again, if you were to become ever at one point, I'm saying hypothetically, worried about Bitcoin, would you come out and say it?
It's like saying that the wheel is invented, and the question is, would you ever at some point believe that the wheel was no longer a viable design?
Okay, fair enough. This will be a good segue into talking about El Salvador, which I really want to get into. Good question here from GeoCrypto. His thoughts on how many countries, and if you have any candidates, that will be the next El Salvador and adopt Bitcoin as legal tender.
Definitely in this region, because I'm here on the ground and I hear a lot of things. I'm not going to speculate because sometimes, I will say that there's a lot of news coming this year in 2022, and El Salvador will be joined by other countries in the very near future.
Okay, so talk to us, educate us about what is your boots on the ground in El Salvador. They're looking to prepare 20 bills to provide legal framework to Bitcoin bonds. What does this mean? What's happening? They're building a Bitcoin city. I mean, I'm picturing like all these like Lego blocks being moved around in my head. But tell us a little bit about what's going on down there, what we should be prepared to hear.
Well, first of all, the IMF can drop dead, right? So in this whole region and in this country has been abused by the IMF for decades. America's overthrown 15 countries in the region. If you read John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, you know the deal. America loads these countries up with debt, then they can't pay the debt. They send in the CIA and the hit squads and they kill people. And that's American foreign policy. So with Bitcoin, it's unconfiscatable and uncensorable. So El Salvador has a way to escape the IMF and escape American colonialization. So that's why people are very, very happy to be part of this, because they realize that they finally have a way, a taste and a way to freedom. As Christine Lagarde has said, Bitcoin is an escape hatch. She's absolutely right. And she understands that her days are numbered as a world banker and as a central banker. So that's kind of the first layer. The second layer is that you have now the best money ever in the history of humans with perfect price discovery and perfect money. So there's a tremendous entrepreneurial explosion happening on the ground, on the grassroots level. People are just building stuff because they realize that when they build it and they earn it, they can keep it and it's unconfiscatable. The remittance market is absolutely remarkable. They're going to make something like 200 billion or 200 million of remittances are going to be savings, 200 million in savings on remittances coming from the U.S. because you're not going to be paying Western Union and these other financial intermediaries that huge fee that they charge for remittances. Migration, you got people coming in like us who want to be citizens. Tourism, skyrocketing. Bitcoin City, the Bitcoin bonds, the volcano bonds, will be facilitating infrastructure build, including Bitcoin City. Bitcoin City is like a free enterprise zone. It'll be a place where it'll be very highly entrepreneurial. It'll attract a lot of capital, a lot of talent, and you're going to see infrastructure build out as a result of this. So the benefits just keep accruing and building, as you would expect when you have Bitcoin as your base money.
How far away are you from getting citizenship and moving there?
It's in the works. It's paperwork, so can't give an exact date. But I feel like I live here already. I feel very acclimated here. It's a
celebrity.
It's like I guess it's like I guess it was like America used to feel when it was an up and coming country before it became ossified and corrupt.
I had seen a survey on Reuters back in the fall saying that most Salvadorians actually disagree with the government's decision to adopt Bitcoin as legal tendered. As much as over 60% of the population did not approve of this move, saying it was just a distraction from Bukele. What do you make of these headlines? Truth to that?
No.
What do you hear from the people when you speak to them?
The popularity of the president is overwhelming, and the support amongst the people for this is high, majority. Again, we're talking about an apparatus with bankers and the media where they work together, right? There's no investigative journalism. I don't know. I think you mentioned Reuters was as a source.
Reuters was the source of this
right. Well, Reuters is corrupt. I mean, I'm a journalist. I've been a journalist for 20 years. And I can tell you, the only show really that breaks it down truthfully is the KEISER report that we do. When you start to look at these other news sources like Reuters in particular and others, this is propaganda. There's a difference between news and propaganda, Daniela. So you have to be very keen and very observant and understand the difference. So most of the news reported in the US, certainly, CNN, MSNBC, are harsh propagandists. If you look who supports those networks, they're defense contractors, and every single story is about why America should go to war. Well, who benefits from that? Cui bono, right? It's the war contractors. That's why, and the tax structure supports the warmongers. Bitcoin is peace. Bitcoin is love. That's why they don't like Bitcoin. And that's why Reuters would write a story to disparage Bitcoin, because they profit from peddling propaganda and war and hate. They're hate mongers. It's sad, but true. Bitcoin is about peace and love. And if Reuters continues to push propaganda, they won't be around. That's as simple as that. So we've got a way to monetize peace, monetize love. And if that doesn't work for you, then get out, go away. We don't need you.
I just want to get your thoughts before we get to the forecast part on gold. You mentioned gold. Last time we spoke, I felt you were a little warm to gold. You were bullish gold. You thought it would be trading over $3,000 an ounce. But now I feel you've almost backtracked to hating gold again. That's the sentiment I'm getting.
In the inflation trade, I mean, there are folks who are going to trade gold. It doesn't interest me at this point anymore. And but there's folks who are going to die with a gold bar in their hand, like Peter Schiff will, have that gold bar frozen in his hand, on his deathbed. He'll never give it up. But that's not me. I'm moving on. And every single month, Bitcoin gets stronger, the fundamentals get stronger, the adoption gets stronger, the technology gets stronger. And so at some point, you just got to say, hey, let's face facts. Bitcoin is going to demonetize gold. That's the bottom line.
Pundits of gold would say that Bitcoin enthusiasts have to bring down gold, have to try and chip away at gold to build up their market cap. They need gold's market cap to reach their goals. And that's why they're using this narrative.
Well, here's what's really going to be the story. That gold mining is an extremely energy intensive business. And Bitcoin, as I said before, is a 51% attack on global energy. So at some point, literally, no one's going to bother spending any energy digging up gold anymore. They just ignore it because they don't want. It's just ignore it. It's just not a matter of taking it down or having an opinion. It's literally going to be ignored. It's just going to be looked at like pebbles on the beach. It's just going to be ignored. No one's going to spend any money digging for gold because all the energy available is going to be mining Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a 51% attack on global energy. That means no energy for gold, no energy for fiat, no energy for shitcoins.
All of a sudden, central banks will view gold as pebbles. Tell that to India and China. You're going to have a complete culture shift happening. How would that play out?
It's coming. It's coming, Daniela. So prepare. You can prepare and ride with it, or you can not prepare and be crushed by it. It's up to you. It's not for me to go out there and have to talk to 8 billion people about this. It's like Noah and the Ark. Some people got it, some people didn't. Good luck.
When do you think central banks will start being vocal about
central
buying?
Banks, when a G7 central bank or a huge sovereign wealth fund starts to, or a Middle East country, they start to dedicate huge resources to Bitcoin buying and mining, that'll set in motion a domino impact. And that'll be the beginning of the end for gold and central banks. We've outlived the nation state. We've outlived central banks. We know we're out of the diaper phase. Fiat money is like a dirty diaper. And every quarter, they come to us and say, we're going to raise the debt ceiling. We need more of a bailout. That's like asking us to change the diapers of the central bank. So Americans have to, take that diaper full of fecal matter, fiat money, and they've got to deal with it. And at some point, we got to grow up and say, you know what? We're potty trained now. We don't need the central bank. We're not going to poop ourselves all day. We're just going to go to Bitcoin and be adults.
When FedCoin, whatever you want to call it, comes about, how will that impact Bitcoin, Max? Wouldn't that cause regulators to start looking at Bitcoin, to step in? Would they see it as a threat? How does that play out for you?
It's meaningless. Regulators have already tried to, China's banned Bitcoin, I think, 20 times. You can't ban Bitcoin. India's trying to ban Bitcoin. You can't ban Bitcoin. There's nothing regulators can do. And by the way, Bitcoin is the most regulated money that's ever existed in the history of man. It's called the Bitcoin protocol, and it's perfect money. So no, they can't compete with that because they're all too corrupt. And it shines a light on their corruption, and it shines a light on people who are intellectually dishonest, like a Rubini or a Paul Krugman or a Peter Schiff. These are intellectually, or Nassim Taleb. His reputation got crushed in 2 weeks. He went from being regarded and well-respected to being a clown in 2 weeks because he refused to accept Bitcoin for what it is, that it wasn't all about him, it's about something else, called Bitcoin. So that plays out globally, it plays out at the central bank level, it plays out in the political level, plays out in the sovereign wealth level. Either get on the Bitcoin wave or be crushed by it. And the regulators, so to get to your point, so regulators, there's literally nothing regulators can do. But as I've been saying now for years, what will happen is regulators will start to buy Bitcoin. We have a fifth column inside government. Senators, congressmen are now buying Bitcoin and supporting Bitcoin. Laws will come in that will start to be impacted by politicians starting to figure out that they need to get with the Bitcoin wave. And so that's the more likely scenario. They're going to stop trying to regulate what they cannot regulate. that's what we're seeing happening now, and it's happening obviously in a country like El Salvador that's small, it's nimble, it's got a great president. They figured this out, and now they're leaping ahead. And then you see the domino effect. Other countries doing the same thing. Then it trickles up to a G7 country, and that's where we're at now. Game theory is at work. It has always been at work since the Genesis block, and it just plays out on higher levels of government and institutions.
This came up a lot also on the fan viewer questions. Why wouldn't you embrace Ethereum? A lot of people, there's talk that, hey, could it overtake Bitcoin one day? There's more uses for Ethereum. Would you consider embracing Ethereum?
Ethereum is centralized garbage. There's unknown how many exist. The supply is unknown. Transactions have been reversed many times. All the servers exist on easily taken down server farms at Amazon or Google. They're moving to a proof of stake system, so it's not even secure anymore, like proof of work. So it's not secure. It's launched Ethereum. We were talking about his project, and I put it to him bluntly. I said, Vitalik, it sounds like your project will not be decentralized like Bitcoin, and it won't be scarce like Bitcoin. How can you justify that? And he said, scarcity doesn't matter. And he said, okay, so here we are. And it's now, it's going to go the way of all altcoins and shitcoins. It'll go to zero against Bitcoin. Also, all the applications that you can do on Ethereum, you can do today on Bitcoin, or we'll be able to do soon. So it doesn't offer, there's no value added. It's a Silicon Valley toy. And Silicon Valley, by the way, hates Bitcoin, and they love Ethereum because also there's a 70% pre-mine with Ethereum. So they're literally dunking on people with the pre-mine. They've got millions and billions, millions of coins, and they go out and they say, hey, this is a great stuff, and they dump it. They dump it. It's a pump and dump scheme. It's an exit scam. The technology stinks. That's why I don't support Ethereum.
So here we are 1 year later, Max KEISER, still extremely bullish Bitcoin, 220,000 still in play for him. Still hates Ethereum, dislikes gold, silver. I think he's still on the fence there. I think he still has a little love in his heart for silver. Let me get to my forecast. Here it is, the paper. Folks, I just want to say, I was going to write another number, but Max was so bullish in that interview that he managed to up my number. So I was going to go with, excuse me, 100,000. But my forecast for 2021 was 163,000 by November 23rd, 2021. But as far off as I was, Max, I still think I came closer than you. So I'll gladly accept that cup of coffee. And
remember, you're not investing in Bitcoin, you're divesting out of everything else. So price is really the least important aspect when it comes to Bitcoin. What you want to look at is hash rate, difficulty adjustment, and other metrics. The price doesn't make it's immaterial because it's going to go, everything else is going to go to zero eventually against Bitcoin. So why bother looking at the price? Just understand that the network is growing. It's growing robustly. The adoption is growing. Hash rate's growing. And that's all you need to look at. When you focus on price, you're gonna become obsessed by price. And again, tell me the technical analysts out there who are billionaires, there are exactly zero. Trading is for losers. Go to Las Vegas and you can gamble in Las Vegas. And by the way, and you go to Las Vegas and you gamble, you're guaranteed to get laid. If you're trading shit coins in your basement in your mom's house, you're not going to get laid. So if at least in Vegas, you can have sex. So if you're a degenerate gambler, go to Vegas. That's where degenerate gamblers go, Daniela. It's a whole city dedicated to degenerates. It's called Las Vegas.
The headlines now: Daniela Camboni's Bitcoin forecast beats Max KEISER's. It's beautiful. And I'm going to write.
I mean, but in 2011, when I mentioned Bitcoin, maybe everyone told me that it wasn't going to go anywhere. Now here we are, and having been the best performing asset in the history of the world. So if you want to look at any 6-month, 9-month period and draw a conclusion from that, again, there's a town in Nevada dedicated to you. It's called Las Vegas.
I have updated it if anyone cares with my 2022 forecast. So we'll see if I beat Max again next year. Max KEISER, enjoy Bitcoin Beach. It's minus 23 in Montreal right now. So I think
it's 80 degrees here, 82 degrees, sunny. The surf is up. It's one of the best surfing beaches in the world.
You're a good sport. Give my love to Stacy, and I hope to see you both soon.
Yeah, move to El Salvador. Leave Canada. That's a socialist hellhole.
Well, I'm in New York City full time.
Oh my God. All right. Well, wear a hazmat suit and carry a gun.
Max KEISER, I'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
See ya.
And thank you all for watching. We'll have much more for you coming your way. Actually, Max, wait, one last question. I lied. What's your forecast for gold in 2022?
I'm not giving any more forecasts for gold or silver. I'm only focused on Bitcoin.
That's it, just like that.
That's it. The curtain is